and borrowing. Because all it is doing is we are aiding the world. We are aiding the world with our own sweat and tears. Folks, if you look at how much money comes into the continent, they bring in 132 billion and they take out 192 billion. So where is aid working for us? Aid is not working for us. Aid is crippling us as a continent. They take it out in all kinds of schemes. All kinds of schemes from the products that they make, that they ship into the continent. But I tell you what, folks, they are here to eat. They are here to eat into our continent. Every single one of them is eating from our plate while we are going hungry. And then they look at us and say, we are hungry and poor. They laugh at us. They create products which reminds us of the bad period in our life when they were involved. You know, when the people at Adidas launched this product a few years ago, they were confused as to why other African Americans are offended by this picture. We're like, oh, I don't know. Does it remind you of 400 years ago? They're like, we apologize, because that's what they always do, right? They apologize. And Africans, we are known for one thing. We are very forgiving. Nobody loves God more than African. And God has told us that we must forgive. And boy, do we forgive in droves. They come to Kenya to launch their airlines. And when they launch their airlines, they say, come to Africa and see the native in their primitive behavior. And the people at Korea Airways, they were confused when the Kenyans were offended. They said, why are they confused? We are bringing an airline to come bring people to Kenya. They're going to come and do safaris and all those. We're like, we are not natives and we are not primitive. We are Kenyans. And you better speak to us with respect. You know, they call us monkeys. And they get confused when the South Africans storm their shops and break them up and tear them around and says, you don't come and call us monkeys in this country, in this continent. And with all the superstars, they said, we no longer do H&M because we don't like to be called names. They get confused as to why we do that. You know, because they think we're monkeys and apes, they then create products and they put our brand, they put monkeys on there and they say, these cigarettes are perfect for Africa. I'm not here to depress you, because you know the score yourself. You know how they look at our continent. They call us the hopeless continent. They look at us when they report about us. They say Africa's woes. They say the agony of Africa when they talk about us. Africa, your time is now. It's your time to change the narrative. It's your time to change the narrative. It's your time to move forward, because we are making money these days. If you look at consumer spending, trillions and trillions and billions of dollars from the continent, we are urbanizing at an incredible rate. You know, yesterday I was driving around, just decided to drive around Kigali. As we know, it's the most cleanest city in the continent. It may be in the world. I mean, I've been to 106 countries. So I think Kigali is clearly one of the cleanest countries I've been to. And I've been to all of them. I've been to every single country in the continent. So I will have an idea or two about what the rest of the continent and the world looks like. This country, this city has done an amazing job. And if you look around, you know, I decided, you know, let me just look around the places. And I look around the places, I'm like, there is not a slum in sight. There is not a slum in sight. It's just one example of a country in the continent, what we are capable of. We are making babies. That's the one problem we don't have as Africans. And we shouldn't apologize for anybody. We need to produce the next World Cup winners, the next workers, the next billionaires. We need to do it fast. You know, so when you look at the statistics, you know, I was in Uganda and I said to the Minister of Uganda, I said, Minister, he interrupted me. He says, Tebe, we personally contribute to their statistics. I said, what do you mean, Minister? He says, you see, here in Uganda, Tebe, we look at a woman and she gets pregnant. He says, that's why we've got 8 to every woman. I'm like, I'm not going to Uganda and I'm not looking at nobody's woman, because I don't want to be accused of having babies everywhere, Uganda. You look at peace and poverty, we are very peaceful. We're a peaceful continent now. We are no longer, don't be confused. Whatever happening in Sudan. You know, I was in Khartoum. I was in Khartoum a week before the uprising, the Fanda uprising. And whatever happens in those countries, it is Africans taking charge of their own destiny. So don't look at those and listen to narratives about Africa being unstable, Africa not being peaceful. We are taking charge of our own destiny, and we are doing it aggressively and because we want to move this continent forward. So what we need to do, forget all these languages we hear about Africa needs to be soft. You used to use the power of soft power to move the continent forward. We need to rebrand this continent. And with the way we're going to rebrand this continent, first and foremost, is with our culture. You saw how beautiful the Rwandan men and women this morning with their culture. As the MC said, you can find this everywhere. It is who we are. We should not apologize. When they say, come to a formal event and you dress like that, you should not apologize. It is who you are. It is who you are. You know, the suit of mine was made by Moses from here, and it's one of Rwanda's leading designers, and it's based on all the culture of here. So it's a mixture of the best and the best of the best of Africa and the best of the rest. And we should do that because if you're proud of your culture, you don't look at the Maasai and say, they are a tribe. They are not a tribe. They are not a little people who are primitive. They are who we are. And who we are, we should be proud to take onto the realms of the world anywhere with pride and be proud to wear that. That's how we're going to rebrand this continent, when we take charge and we're proud of our culture. Or a young old woman, Esther Matlango, she's about, how old is Esther now? I think it's about 83 Esther. And I said to her, Mama, why is everybody so excited about your culture? Why is everybody wants the Ndebele in their vehicles? I said, why do people like BMW? You are the only artist in the world who's been asked twice by BMW to bring your culture, your identity into a global brand like BMW. Why? What do you do so special? He said, nothing, my child. I said, what do you mean? He says, all I do is I love my culture. And I do what I was taught as a young woman, that you look after your home, you decorate it. All they are doing, they're appreciating who I am. I'm doing nothing special. I'm doing nothing to make money. I'm just being myself, because that's what it takes. You know, that's what it takes when they come to our countries and they ask us to host World Cups. We said to them, we want us to host the World Cup. We have... How many people are coming? Sepp Blatter. And Sepp Blatter, no, he lies. That's why he's in jail now. Or is he somewhere? I don't know. He said 400 people are coming to Africa. We're like, whoa, Sepp, 400 million people coming to Africa. How are we going to deal with that, Sepp? We said, Sepp, this is Africa. We have to go feed them all out of a calabash. We need to feed them out of a calabash, Sepp. Because in Africa, that's what it shows, that you are welcome. You are going to eat. You are going to eat from us. So, Sepp, just keep it on that, comrades. They can see me. So Sepp came to Africa. Sepp says, how are we going to, we said, Sepp, we're going to feed them out of a calabash. Sepp says, I am used to Wembley Stadium. I am used to Stade de France. He says, do not come and talk about African things. This is a World Cup. I'm bringing the world to Africa, and it must be to the world's standards. We're like, Sepp, how does this look for you? Sepp said, brilliant. Better than Wembley. Made in Africa. Because our culture is like that. We can express it and celebrate it everywhere. The minister's left, but if you speak to the minister, he'll tell you that the Ashanti stool is the seat of government. And the seat of government means when there's an important meetings, that's where you sit. That's where you sit as a king, sorry, a seat of chiefs rather. That's where the chiefs sit on. So naturally, when they are going to build in Ghana, the seat of government, they need to take inspiration where? From Ghanaian culture. Because that is us celebrating our culture. Or a young man, Laduma, who from South Africa, who says, us as an African, I go through a ritual, a circumcision ritual, and we wear these blankets and we wear these jerseys, these knitted jerseys. And he said, I want to celebrate that. I no longer want to hide my culture from the world. I want to celebrate who I am, celebrate my culture, and take it out to the world. So when he put this to the world says, oh my goodness. Zara copied it. And we sued them. Because Laduma said, my culture must be celebrated, but on my own terms. His jerseys are about the same price as the jerseys for Missoni. Because he said, I'm a luxury brand. He says, my culture is luxury. And I must celebrate that every day. The second way, folks, we are going to move this continent forward, that we are going to rebrand this continent, is we need to take care of identity, who we are. We should not be apologizing whether you're a king. There's no need for you to dress like the soldiers from England. You must just be who you are. That's how you should be everywhere else. And that's how you must appreciate. You must appreciate when the East Africans say, we are going to speak Kiswahili here. Because it is the biggest language in the continent. And we should celebrate that because, I think it is Mandela who once said, Mandela says, when you speak to somebody in their language, it goes straight to their heart. Because, this English that we speak every day is not our thing. We've just picked it up along the street. I think we should just speak it at those places when we're sitting around tables doing things. Because you've seen us how we are when we speak our language. We are excitable, we are vibrant, we are expressive, we are happy. And then as soon as we speak English, we then go into a we think we are important when we speak English. Because we can't understand this. It's not our language. Folks, we are not as expressive as we are when we speak other people's languages. That's why you got to appreciate, as I said, the East Africans that says, this is what we are going to do. Everybody must speak Kiswahili. We need to own our own narrative. We need to tell our story ourselves. Because if you don't tell your story, CNN will tell it for you from their perspective. BBC will tell you the story from their perspective. Al Jazeera will tell you a story from their perspective. I always say, people, why are Africans going on and on about BBC, CNN are not saying the right picture of Africa? Whose channels are they? Get your own channel. They are American, they are British, and they are Arab, and they want to tell the story from their perspective. You start your own Africa channel, and you tell the story from your own way. Some of the people that we know are doing that. You have to appreciate our Nigerians. Because I'm South African, but I've been everywhere. And when I speak to my South African brothers and sisters, and they watch these movies from Nigeria, but I'm sure even here it's the same story. When you watch these stories from Nigeria, we're like, oh, it's about witchcraft. Somebody stole somebody's husband. Somebody's sleeping with a neighbor. The priest is coming for lunch and takes more than lunch. We're like, whoa. Who makes these stories? These are everyday stories, folks. They happen in your neighborhood as well. So what the Nigerians have said, they've said, we are not going to apologize. We are going to tell our stories as we see them. And then the South Africans will go, but there's not even a plot. I'm saying, what do you mean there's no plot? They're like, where's the production manager? These things don't have a storyline. These things, I said, there's a whole storyline. It's called Tell It As It Is. Put it out there as it is. They're like, but how? There's no post-production. These things are out. They are being pre-recorded in the morning. At lunchtime, they're being broadcast. I say, this is Africa. There's no time to waste. You need to make money. Oh. Our friend, Tonje Bakang, is like, what's this Netflix nonsense? He's like, I'm going to do my own thing, Africa Stream. Because, with Netflix, now you have to obey somebody's rules, right? With Africa Streams, you obey African rules because, our rules are different. Just like the European rules are different. And there's no problems with that. We are who we are. My young friend, Nelson, obviously a global star now in art. During a global something in South Africa, I don't know what it's called, on the weekend, on December, Oprah Winfrey went to his studio. And Oprah bought tons of Nelson's artwork. And as Oprah left Nelson, Oprah said to Nelson, you are underpriced. Oprah says, Nelson, what do you mean? She's like, in my house, I've got a $2 million painting. I'm going to remove it and I'm going to put yours up. And you are selling me this for this little. As I leave this place, Nelson, can the prices please go up 10 times? He says, just as a start. Because sometimes we tend to underappreciate who we are. And when you look at Nelson's story is all those pictures. He says, you have to look at the world through the eyes of children. That's why he put glasses on them. He says, because they see a positive continent. Part of changing our narratives is understanding our history, where we come from, whether it's 400 years of slavery, whether it is tribalism here, or whether it is in South Africa, apartheid. Take that story and change it for your own and decide which part of the story you want to tell the world and how you want to tell it. Because a lot of the times what holds us back, what traps us as Africans, is we are trapped by the stories which were created by those who came before us, who are not like us, who came here for different reasons. We need to tell the story from our own way, moving forward. I told you I took time to go to the churches on Monday. Yesterday I did the gorillas. I looked at everything about Rwanda. I've been to Rwanda more than 10 times. Lots of times. I know some have been more, but that's enough for me. And when you talk about Rwanda, most people will say, oh, the genocide. But I think the president of Rwanda put it right. He said, we are wounded, but we are not vanquished. That's what he said on the 25th anniversary this year. We are wounded, but we are not vanquished. And this is what victory looks like. The cleanest city. Every third Saturday of the month, the Rwandans, they say, you will not leave your house between 8 and 11. You will clean within the line of sight of your place, because that's how we're going to keep this country, the city, looking as clean as it is. They said when people come to the world here in Africa, in Rwanda, they must see a Rwanda that can host the World Economic Forum and many other global fora, and us being here, because the story that you tell about the world is not to harp on the back on what brought you down, not to harp on the evil, but rather to never forget, but to build on that, or to build from that. I was in Somalia, I was in Mogadishu. I was in Mogadishu a week after. I'm very lucky, either a week before or a week after. I was in Mogadishu a week after they bombed that main street. And across the road, people had been busy furiously. There's beautiful buildings on the other side. Those who've been to Mogadishu, the one side is beautiful buildings, the other side is beautiful ruins. I'm like, how does this work? He says, as they destroy this, we build another one faster and better. That's how we tell our story as Africans. We move on forward. As the Stan Bank says, they call it Africa, we call it home. Folks, if it is your home, you will make it work. If it's your home, you will fix it. You will not look anywhere else for solutions. You will look to your own, where you come from, and say, if the story about your continent is going to go out into the world, like Black Panther, which is the biggest grossing movie last year, it must represent the narratives from where you come from. We need to own our ideas. Africans will say, these toothpicks, we started them. I'm like, when? They're like, we used to take matchsticks and we used to clean our teeth. Now the Mzungus have taken them and they're selling them back to us. We're like, well, you didn't own the idea. You may have come up with the idea. The people in Zimbabwe say to me, Tebe, this Mazoi comes from Mazoi valleys. But now the people at Schweppes own it. I'm like, well, you didn't register it. They registered it. You see, I'm struggling with my friend at the back. He's sleeping. He's sleeping. Wake up. The people in Ethiopia. Coffee comes from Ethiopia, from Kaffa. Coffee. The story of Ethiopian. So when the people from Starbucks came to Africa and they started buying coffee, they started buying coffee, right? From our continent, from Africa, from Ethiopia, from Uganda, from Kenya, even from Rwanda as well. And guess what happened, folks? Starbucks used to come to Africa, buy the coffee for about $2, go back to America, and make $24 out of the $2. And the people at Ethiopia, the coffee, they said, somebody's getting screwed, but we don't know who. They're like, we don't know how this is working out. They're like, these Mzungus are magic. They take $2, they make 24. Even Jesus only made how many loaves out of They're like, these people are amazing. They went to the people at Starbucks and said, explain to us how you create such magic. And the people at Starbucks says, oh, there's no magic. It's called branding. We brand our coffee. They're like, yo. So they got somebody to help them to brand their coffee. And they branded their coffee into different names. And when they finished the branding of the coffee, the people at Starbucks came to buy coffee. And they said, coffee is now $24. They're like, sorry. They're like, sorry. How did you arrive at 24? We used to buy this coffee at $2. They're like, branding. We used your tricks to change the narrative. They argued for about 3 years. If you know the story, they argued for about 3 years. They met each other halfway. The Americans are making money. The Ethiopians are making money. Everybody is happy. Branding rules. Do you know the people in, I'm not going to get into the stories about Jollof. I am not going to start the stories about Senegal, Ghana, and Nigeria, and Gambia. I'm saying nothing. I've got friends in 55 countries in the continent. I'm going to be very peaceful. I'm going to keep those relationships. I will say I have eaten Jollof everywhere. I've eaten Jollof everywhere. I will give the verdict privately outside. But there is no Jollof like an African Jollof. Because you know when Mama mixes it up, and then she's sweating, and then she's mixing it. I don't know what else happens. I think a fly or two falls in, and they mix it back. Because that's how we do things. That's why it's got that special taste that the white people can't repeat. They've been trying. They're trying it. Some of them, like Jamie in London, went and did that Jollof. But asking African, they're like, Jamie's Jollof is not the one. So Jamie's Jollof is not the one. What we need to do, folks, is we need to brand our own Jollof, like my Oga brothers in London. Take their Jollof and brand it, and ask Mama to put in a little potion that gives it that kick that only us can give. Branding. You know the audacity of the Mzungus? They fight us over rooibos. Rooibos is a South African word. The tea that they all want. And they come here and fight us and they say, rooibos is French. Well, Manami, wait. How does rooibos sound like to you? Because it ain't French. Or South Africa fought with the France, with the European Union for many, many years. Finally, sanity prevailed, and they agreed rooibos is South African. You got to fight for intellectual property, folks. The problem we have as Africans is we are not investing in research and development. We are just thinking that we are just going to pitch up and do things the way we've done them in the past. We need to put money into research. We need to trademark our ideas. That's how we're going to move this continent forward. Fifth, we need to own the value chain. Own the value chain. You own everything from the minute you start thinking about planting that seed to the minute that seed ends up on the shelf of a shop. That's what we do. That's what makes companies like the BS. You know, if you look at the Botswana. The people in Botswana, they said, something is not working. They're like, what do you mean? They're like, we dig the diamonds out of Botswana. We send them to England to be polished. What's wrong with the soap in Africa and the polish in Africa? They clean them and polish them in London. They send them back to you. And you are so proud to go buy them at the jeweler for 100%, for 1,000% markup. The people in Botswana, they say, wait. So we are creating jobs out in England and not here. We are not training our own people to cut, to polish, and to market diamonds. We need to bring everything back here. That's what Botswana did. They say everything now has to be done here in Botswana. Every single part of the diamond story. We need to connect, folks. It doesn't make sense that 15% of the trade, that Africans only trade with each other 15% of the time. Africans are not trading with each other because, you know, Africans are very happy to take the money out to go buy an apartment out in London, and they think they have arrived. The Queen says, there comes the dumb nigger. All our money. You take your money out of here into London, into America, instead of keeping it right here in the continent. We need to do business with each other. We need to do business with each other, folks. That's why you got to appreciate the efforts that have been made to make travel easier across the continent. You know, I'm a bit fortunate in that to do the entire continent, I used one passport, not one. I mean, 12 passports, but I used one South African passport. I did not have to go find one from Europe to go claim ancestry. It doesn't exist. And what I did is I took the place and I stayed in the continent to get into the continent. Only one country, Cabo Verde, I had to get out to come back in. But I could have either spent time. If I had 2-3 days to spare, I could have stayed in Africa to go to Cabo Verde. Just that the timing was not right. It's easy to travel the continent. Do not listen to what everybody's telling you, because they're going out there and telling you how difficult it is to travel your continent. Get into a bus, get into a taxi, start hiking, get into a matatu, get into a bicycle. You will get to this continent easy. But yes, I acknowledge the challenges, and somebody needs to work on them. They need to give us one passport. We're tired of having 10 passports and 100 visas to get through the continent. It takes about 30, 40 visas to travel the continent. It's unacceptable. That's why you got to appreciate a country like Rwanda, like Ghana, like Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles, where there is visa on arrival or no or for all Africans. I mean, I think Seychelles is no visa. Mauritius is no visa. Yes, I got to appreciate the Ogas in Nigeria. They're saying, oh, they finally agreed now, the people from ECOWAS. They're like, can we just have one currency? I was in Burkina Faso, and I was running up and down, being stupid, just chilling, hanging in Burkina Faso, and I come across some kids, and they were all complaining about the CFA currency. So I said, let me try and find out what the CFA actually is about. Colonies of France in Africa. I'm like, oh, the audacity. In 2019, you still have a currency that's called CFA, or you've changed it now. It's not something commercial, Francais, or what, Afrique. I don't even know what it is now. But the original name, everybody knows, is Colonies of Africa, Colonies of France in Africa. We ain't having none of that. We ain't having none of that. We're having our own currencies, because that's how it should. We're going to move this continent forward. Why should the dollar be more powerful than our afros? We need to create our own afro. Finally, we need to brand and brand and brand. It's not going to help us, folks, that when you go to our Instagrams, we've got pictures with us in Gucci, pictures with us in fake Chanel, pictures of us in fake Louis Vuitton, pictures of us looking like we are fabulous using somebody else's hair. Poor horse in Europe is looking for his hair, and we are here. We are using none of our stuff. Folks, we haven't arrived until we do our own thing. When you get back home today, please look into your cupboard. You'll see in your cupboard that everything that you eat is from outside of the continent. 10 companies out of Africa are feeding you. 8 is rife, and you think you have arrived. Arriving is creating your own brand from here and doing the reverse, feeding them, like Nando's. Started in South Africa, small town, the biggest fast food restaurant in the world now, like Dangote from Nigeria. It's going to make you cement, and it's going to make you fufu. Just don't mix them. But he's feeding us with our, I was walking around in Chad. I was in Chad. I was walking around and I'm seeing Dangote cement. I'm like, in Chad, everywhere. Dangote is everywhere. And it should be, and it better be. We need all brands everywhere to be all the way from Africa. Or this young man, Tsepo, is 25. He had the audacity to create his own jeans to compete against Levi's. Or the folks in Kenya who now have established the one mobile money transfer that is the global standard in the world. Because everybody in the world says, how did the Kenyans do it? How can you holler for a taxi with M-Pesa? And it's not just them. In Somalia, 98%, they use mobile money. Mobile money. Or the people in Uganda, they have the audacity to start a Kira electric car. The first electric car created by Africans in Africa, from a small university in East Africa. You know, H&M knows how to forgive. We know how to, Africans have said we know how to forgive, but H&M knows how to apologize. Because last week on Friday, they came back to apologize to South Africa and for the mess of calling us monkeys. And they launched a whole new range with a young South African designer, which is now, as I'm talking today, in 44 stores all over the world. Don't just come take our ideas. Give us some of the cash. Here's a challenge we face, folks. Every year we conduct the most admired brands survey of the most admired brands in the world. And when you look at that survey that we do every year, we've done it for 10 years now, covering over 15,000 brands every year, mentioned 2,000 times. Here is the problem, 80-20 problem. I know some of us are smart and you've got 10 degrees, they call it Pareto's principle. No. 80% or 86% of the brands that Africans admire are non-African. Folks, we have a problem. We don't love ourselves. Because 86% of the brands that we admire are non-African, and we can see those brands. My friend here from Coca-Cola from Angola, he knows what I'm talking about. I spent 6 years as marketing director for Nike for the continent, so I know what I'm talking about. So I got a bit of context of how these things are done. We need to fix the problem. There's nothing wrong with having global problem brands in a continent. What is important is we need to make sure that we are creating competitive brands and not just have the best brands from the rest of the world dominating us. Because our brands, folks, can travel. Because branding started here. As early as 2700 BC in Egypt. Our challenges are many, but if you reduce them all, 1963, 24 May, Kwame Nkrumah sat at the OAU then, and they laid out the path for the continent. They said we need to create a common market for Africa, an African currency, an African monetary zone, an African central bank, continental African communication system, a foreign policy and diplomacy, common system of defense, and common African citizenship. 1963, we are still talking. Can we just shut up and start working? Because that's what we've been doing. We've been talking, folks. If we're going to move this continent forward, we need to implement this agenda most urgently. And we need to remember, as Wangari Maathai said, you cannot enslave a mind that knows itself, that values itself and understands itself. Because, folks, as Fela said, you must identify with this continent if you're going to have an identity. Thank you.
Don't be in a hurry to get off the stage, Mr. Ntebe. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. You started this, so you better finish it. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Ntebe. Ntebe Kgaleka. Thank you so much. Amazing presentation, and what a way to start the plenary sessions. And of course, Ntebe is the founder, Brand Leadership Group from South Africa. Of course, he gave a lot of perspectives using context from South Africa or in South Africa. Right. You really touched some nerves. You hit some nerves. And I'm sure that this conversation is not ending on the stage, because definitely it will continue and resonate across the continent. But to further engage with you, probably dig a bit more into the thought process behind why you had to put that slide together, and of course the sort of narrative we should take on about Africa going forward. It's with pleasure I would like to welcome Group Head Communications and Brand, Lonim PLC, South Africa. Please make welcome for Wendy Liu as she goes on one-on-one with Ntebe. A round of applause for Wendy Liu. Welcome, Wendy. Okay. Kunjani. Oh, yes. Okay. Over to you, Wendy.
Okay. There we go.
It's on now.
Oh, now it's on. It always happens in African time. Good afternoon, everybody. And Tebe, thank you for invigorating us. And I think also thank you for making us a bit uncomfortable about seeing ourselves and how we are seen by the world. I think when you see yourself in pictures, it becomes all the more real. Jollof eating, Africa traveling, marketer par excellence. I'd like to almost bring the conversation now that you've triggered to how do we branding or nation branding, and particularly to ask as a kickoff, is it really important for African countries to participate in what is known as place branding, and why?
Good question. I think we have always, I think we like putting labels to things, because now we call them place branding, competitive identity, nation branding, and all those things. We always have, I ended with a slide that says you must identify with Africa, then you'll have an identity. Then you have an identity. Because it's important to know who you are. And the concept of nation branding is really about understanding two parts. Two things. First is understand who you are, what makes you different, and to use that difference, that distinction, to compete. That's what you need to do. And a lot of what we're trying to do now is we are trying too hard as Africans to assimilate. We are trying too hard to be like Europe or like other countries. So even within Africa, if you speak to the people from Uganda, from Kenya, from South Africa, they're all going to tell you they've got the big five. They're all going to tell you the same stories. You speak to the people, like I said, West Africa, they all make the best jollof, or they all make the best bisap. Nobody says, what makes me different and distinctive? What can I leverage, and how can I leverage this to compete in the world? When you think about America, for example, you say, oh, America, that's entrepreneurship.
The land of dreams.
The land of dreams. Yeah. If you think about England, you say it's a place of traditions.
Absolutely.
And if you think about Brazil, you say, oh, the land of samba. Yeah. So we need to understand yourself beyond just being African, because being African, so a lot of us, think we can trade on the name Africa. That's not a currency on its own.
But now we have this double whammy. So you showed in one of your slides the flag of Zimbabwe and how perceptions of Zimbabwe by Zimbabweans themselves, by Africans ourselves, by the external world are then translated into what Africa is seen as. Then we have to layer on that how we've organized ourselves for economic integration, for travel and movement around the continent. So we've got COMESA, we've got SADC. And we do it, to be quite honest, for the benefit of the first world, so that they can actually recognize us, that, oh, they are in a SADC state, or they are part of COMESA. So it's not really to our advantage. So my question then, Ben, is how do we pull away from that? How does a country pull away from that quagmire where we are seen with one stroke? So that's the first part of the question. And then secondly, for those countries that have been able to successfully pull away, is it an obligation or a duty for them to take others along? Because at the end of the day, nation branding is about competitiveness. Do you want to go out and share with other countries that which you have become extremely competitive at, and that brings you that much needed and tourism investment, foreign direct investment, and those kind of things?
There's probably one president alive today in the whole wide world who is probably the best at what he does, Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump, as has been described many times, campaigned on misogyny, campaigned on racism, campaigned on putting America first, and he came into power to do just that. So what we're seeing in the world of America today, we are seeing somebody who understands the direction he wants to take his country, and is steadfast on doing that.
Irrespective of whether we like it
Irrespective of whether we like it or don't like it. If there is a lesson I think, and in many ways, to an extent, in Rwanda, President Kagame has, President Kagame, into extent, he says, you know what? We are going to run Rwanda on Rwandan terms. We are not going to try and explain ourselves to the rest of the world. So although these are two different types of presidents, what we are learning, what one should learn from both of them, is how important it is to understand, I said earlier, who you are, but most importantly, understand the trajectory you want to take your country. And you need to focus on that. If there's anything Donald Trump has taught us, if there's anything, or has reminded us, that the success of any nation, or the success of Africa, perhaps in many ways, is going to lie in Africa thinking inward. So we need to do the things which are uncomfortable. And the most uncomfortable thing we are going to need to do is what Trump has done: protectionism. We need to think inwardly, because when you think inwardly, you are going to burn with creativity. You are going to be able to create. There's a good example: South Africa during apartheid.
Sure.
So South Africa during apartheid was a pariah state. Nobody wanted to do business with South Africa. Nobody wanted to engage with South Africa. So what did the former colonial rulers do? They looked internally. They closed the borders, and out of that, they created Old Mutual. They created many other successful Pan-African and global brands like Sasol out of South Africa, and created an economy which today is but 50-60% of the continent's GDP. So there is a lesson there that if you do look internally, you will be forced to create. The problem with us Africans is because we look so much externally, is we then abdicate the responsibility to create to others for ourselves. So yes, so to me, to answer your question, we need to look internal. So we need to look to ourselves for the solutions of how we're going to move this continent forward. Yes, the second question relates to what about those countries, South Africa, Kenya,
that have succeeded,
Nigeria,
or some way,
who are succeeding in some way.
In some way, yeah.
Do they have a responsibility to bring others up? We've got the responsibility to share best ideas.
Right.
We've got the responsibility to lift each other, because in African culture and African community, as you rise, you must lift. But that does not mean you must do the same mistakes that colonialism did.
Sure.
It means you don't create dependency, because we know what dependency have done. So there's a challenge, a criticism about South Africa, for example, is that a lot of times we tend to be a bit colonial in how we do things. We arrive in the country.
Take over.
And Andy spoke about it earlier, that we'll arrive in a country and we want to impose how things should be done. So your job is not to impose. When people ask me, how do you travel so effortlessly everywhere? I say, simple. I leave South Africa at the airport every time I leave the country. Similarly, that's how you build your brand. Do not bring your country's problems and issues and way of doing things to other people's countries. But because we are all Africans, do lend a helping hand and say, I can guide you in terms of, I can share with you how we traveled our journey, but you need to travel your own journey your own way.
So very interesting that you say there's a lot to learn in the promises that Donald Trump made to the American people, but also what I find quite particularly interesting about him is the ability to deliver against those promises ever so effectively. On a day-to-day basis. And perhaps that's one thing that that kind of resolve is what is really needed by us as Africans. We're sitting here in a room, not as full as I think we would have liked it to be. And also we have issues of, do South Africans go into other countries and impose themselves on other nations in the on the continent and all this sort of thing. So one has to ask ourselves then, is the issue us, perhaps? Is the issue ourselves in this? Do we have somewhere in us this inertia to move from having conversations, because we've been having conversations, to taking very uncomfortable decisions that are going to propel our countries forward? And when we do, Thebe, and perhaps because you've traveled the continent so extensively and so often, have you seen where that resolve has worked? But also, has it been impactful in the lived realities of the citizens of those countries? Because we do all we do. We brand, we do nation branding, we do place branding. But actually, is it felt by the people of those countries to whom the countries belong?
And let me address that, not because I'm here, but being here is a reminder
Sure.
of just that question. That how a nation just 25 years ago was, for all intents and purposes, obliterated. And how the resolve of the leadership to reimagine what a country can be, what this country can be, has resulted in a country which is among the fastest growing economies, I said the cleanest. You walk around here and you see infrastructure going up every day. You walk around to what we would call slums. They don't have such things. They don't have such, yes, there's poor people and there's rich people, as there are through all society. But it is not undignified poverty as you see, as you see everywhere. So of course there's an example of a country that's been able to reimagine that. And for a small period in South Africa's time, if you remember when Mandela came out of jail, for a small period, for 10 years or so, we set the example of what it's like to be able to move forward as a country. Leadership is very important. I think it's Napoleon Bonaparte who said, a leader is a dealer in hope. So because what a leader does, he embodies the ambitions, the hopes, the dreams of the people. And the leaders who do well are those who are able to consistently do that and deliver that. You ask the question, where does the problem lie? The problem lies in this room. We Africans are our biggest problem. We Africans are our biggest obstacle. We Africans are the reasons we, Africa, is not moving forward. We need to identify with this continent. We need to understand who we are. We need to understand the game plan. We need to say, if this is going to be, it should be up to us, because we are the ones we've been waiting for.
I'd like to thank you, Thebe. And you know, I think for me, what you've just said rings so very true, because and taking nothing away from the powerful and very influential speakers we're going to have access to in the next 2.5 days. But I can imagine that had it been a keynote speaker from some European country, this room would have been full. So perhaps it is us that we need to look at and say, how do we want to participate and respond to these conversations about changing the narrative or infusing new narratives in how our continent is seen if we ourselves don't show up? Because really it's about showing up. And I'd like to bring it to the audience and perhaps ask a few people, if any people that'd like to ask Thebe or myself a question. We're almost taking what Thebe was sharing with us earlier on and centering it in terms of how countries and nations can really benefit from some of the things that Thebe had mentioned around identity, around culture, around owning our own intellectual property. We have people who are marketers and communicators in public service, who are in the private sector, who are in FMCGs, who are here with us. So if you have any questions, please raise a hand so that this becomes a little bit more interactive and we're not sitting here talking at you as if we have nothing to hear from you or to learn from you as the day progresses. There's a question there.
Okay. Good afternoon. Okay. Thank you very much for your kind words. My name is Eyine Apollos. I am from Nigeria, Aba to be precise. Before you came on, I was discussing with her. I'm sorry if what I'm going to say will offend some persons. We're talking about speaking for Africa here. The first panel that sat, I have a picture of them, and I was trying to make an upload. I said, I can't send this as speaking for Africa. We come from different parts of Africa. We have the way we look, and you made mention of that. I would have thought that coming to this event, we should all have looked like real Africans coming from different backgrounds. We all have good suits made from other parts of the world. But for me, I choose to come here with this my beautiful dress made in Aba, and I'm so proud of it. And I would have also wished that. So, like I said, it would be difficult tweeting those photographs of the first panel because they are not looking Africa, and they're also not speaking Africa with their attire. So I think one of the best and most effective way we can speak for Africa is the way we appear, the way we dress. Thank you very much.
Wendy?
Thank you for that comment. I'm hoping I understood it well, that speaking for Africa and having a voice around ourselves, how we look is also a critical factor and a significant factor in how those conversations are received, A, by us, but also by other people. So it becomes critically important that we also carry our Africanness in how we present ourselves.